Like I said, my name is Sarah Corcoran. I am the Forest Watch Coordinator for the Pennsylvania chapter of the Sierra Club. And today we will be talking about gardening for wildlife, how to create your own backyard habitat. In these particular times, we are spending a lot more time in our backyards, and it would be lovely if we could invite our native species to come in and enjoy those areas with us. So if you'd like to click on the next slide, Rachel. So what exactly is a habitat? In its core form, a habitat is what is needed for something to survive: food, water, shelter. National Wildlife Federation, which is the organization that certifies backyard habitats, has broken down the shelter component into a little bit more, into cover and a place for wildlife to raise their young. So you'll see 5 criteria on that screen: food, water, cover, place for wildlife to raise their young. And then a 5th one: sustainable gardening practices. That one has been added in because we are creating our own habitat in this occasion, and it would not do for us to go through all of this to make a suitable habitat for our native wildlife species, and then to dump fertilizers and chemical pesticides on our property. So you can click on the next slide. So why create a wildlife habitat? Well, it supports native wildlife. It improves water quality, reduces water usage and stormwater runoff. It reduces air pollution, saves money on heating and cooling bills. If you have deciduous trees in your backyard, it'll create a cover, a shade cover for you in the summer and help with your cooling costs. Evergreen trees, your conifers, they will help out with your heating costs in the winter because they add a little bit of a cushion around your property. They raise your property value. Everybody likes a home with a nice, with nice gardens, and they will also help you at the end of the day and really enjoy being outside and observing wildlife in your own property. If you look on the screen, you'll see 2 completely different types of homesteads. You have your traditional lawn on the one side, and you have a backyard habitat on the other side. And you can see there's a distinct difference between the 2. One is very flat and monocultured. The other one has a little bit more shading and some differentiation when it comes to the plant life. We can click on the next slide. So the next few slides I'll be going over are your basic food, water, and shelter, and how you can make those things within your backyard. And I am saying backyard here, but it does not matter the size of your property. You could create a backyard habitat on a porch, or in a small little side parcel. As long as you have the different components needed, you would be considered a certified backyard habitat. So for the food section, you want to provide native plants, which will offer seeds, berries, fruits, nuts, nectar, pollen, all those good things that animals need to survive. And you could also do supplementary feeders in place. So you don't want feeders to be your sole source of food for native wildlife. You want to have these native plants in there, and there are multiple reasons behind that, not just for the food source, but you don't want to just feed birds and wildlife food that we're giving them. It's not healthy. So use those only as supplements. If we can click on the next page. So why native plants? They're adapted to local conditions. They use less of everything, less fertilizer, pesticides, water, because they are adapted to this location. They support insect and pollinator populations and help out with biodiversity in the region. They also are much less high. There are more low maintenance, there we go, and often have deeper roots. So if you look at this next picture, you'll be able to kind of see the difference between your non-native and your native species. If we can click on. So if you look at this slide, now, not all of these are going to be found right around here. Some of them are a little bit farther south, but your black-eyed Susans and the like, they are going to be native to this location. But you'll see like the native plants have much deeper root systems, which help with erosion control and absorbing more of the stormwater. Now, let's click. It is suggested that you don't just put in 1 or 2 native plants. You want to have a good variety. So when you're planting your backyard habitat, try to have at least around 20 native plants. It does seem like a lot to ask, but there's already going to be some plants going on in your backyard that you can just leave be. We can click on the next slide. So here are a few examples of different native plants that you could look for in your nurseries or in any place that sells your native plants. Not every backyard is going to be the same. Sometimes you have a really sunny backyard, sometimes it's really shady. Some areas have a lot of moisture. I know my backyard is a very moist environment. So you want to pick native plants that are suitable for where you live. So I have a couple of different plants that have been picked out that are good for different types of environments. And if you're interested in the pictures of the plants that are next to it, on the top, that is a tulip tree. And in the bottom, those are black-eyed Susans. They are both very prevalent in this area. So again, once this presentation is done, we will be sending out the slides to everyone who has signed on, so you don't have to worry about jotting down any notes or anything like that. So there are trees, shrubs, and perennials, or grasses and ferns for each of the different locations. Not every location will be suitable for trees, so don't worry about trying to get some of each of these things. If you'd like to click on the next slide, Rachel. So those were all sunny plots. So your next set is going to be for your shady plots. So the plants that are pictured in there, the ones on the tops are Dutchman's breeches, and the ones on the bottom is Virginia bluebells. So these are going to be good examples of plants that are adapted for shadier locations. Your top is your shady and your moist, and the bottom are shady and dry. There is a normal variation in sunlight depending on where you live, so you'll probably have some sort of combination of both shady and full sun. So just keep that in mind when you are planting your backyard. Okay. So the second component that you need, the second requirement besides food, is going to be water. Everyone requires water in order to survive. You need it to drink, bathe, we need it for breeding purposes. So you want to have some form of water in your backyard habitat, whether it's a bird bath or a butterfly drinking station, whether it's a pond or a stream. Some form of water for your wildlife to be able to survive. You can click on the next, and then the last components that you're going to need are some form of cover and a place to raise their young, which are very similar. They're both forms of shelter, but they're slightly different in that, you know, not every place that is a place to raise their young would be considered a cover, and vice versa. So for the cover, that's just places to hide, seek shelter from people and predators during inclement weather. And this could be your native vegetation. It could be ponds. You could build bird houses, or there's a little picture of a toad abode, a little toad house. You could do mason bee houses, bat boxes. any combination of natural or man-made endeavors in this section. And then click on the next. And then for places to raise your young, you could have nesting boxes or bat boxes, bird houses. You could provide areas of dense vegetation, or leave down a tree or two that might have fallen in a storm, so that way there are places for animals to hide. Under the cover section, there was a portion where you could have, if you have a stone wall on your property or any larger rocks, you can make a rock feature and have that be a place where smaller animals could hide. And any way that you would like to tweak it so that there are places available for a cover. And then I'm going to be turning it over to my co-facilitator, Rachel Rosenfeld, to do the remainder of the program. We will be doing a quick run through of a arts and crafts project, and going over the requirements for certification.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I really hope everyone can hear me. I know there might be a lag in the slides, so I apologize for that. And if I start talking about a slide before we get to it, hopefully it'll catch up. We want to talk to everyone a little bit about the fifth component of certifying your yard as a wildlife habitat, and that includes sustainable gardening practices. Now, these practices are where improving water quality and reducing stormwater runoff kind of come into play. So some of these practices include water conservation techniques. So everything from installing a rain barrel, which will conserve water and keep it off of your property, as well as offer you a free resource to water your garden. Creating a rain garden. If you have a shallow depression in your yard that sort of tends to collect water, if you can fill it with native plants, ones that like wet environments, that's another opportunity to create a wildlife garden, but also absorb stormwater and protect and clean water quality. There's also something called a downspout planter, which serves a similar purpose to the rain barrel, but it's actually a vegetated planter that's just below your downspout. I don't have an image of that to show you, but it's a really great way to incorporate these practices as well. If you happen to have a stream on your property or nearby your property that you have a little bit of leeway with planting some vegetation, otherwise known as riparian area, or a buffer zone between your property and the stream, that can also serve to provide slowing down of stormwater off your property and infiltrating that stormwater into the ground, filtering out pollutants, and providing a home for wildlife. We want to make sure that we're also limiting our usage of chemicals and pesticides. Sarah had mentioned that earlier when we were talking about the difference between a lawn and a wildlife habitat is that it's a naturalized area that's safe for wildlife, and so we want to make sure that we're reducing that. We want to also encourage plant species diversity. We do that through planting natives and plants that can tolerate frost, pests, longer periods of less water. And those are going to be your native plants. If you have some invasive in your property, maybe some English ivy, things like that, you may want to try to cut those back or remove them. If they've been established for a long time, they're probably providing some habitat. But if they're new to the environment, you may want to try to reduce those. Another thing we didn't quite talk about, but this is another practice, is trying to reduce the size of your lawn, or cutting the grass or mowing the grass less often is another way. Letting the grass grow a little bit will provide more opportunities for our insect populations. Our lawns tend to act like concrete, allowing water to run straight off and there really is no beneficial habitat provided to our wildlife, no food, no water opportunities provided by our lawns. So we want to reduce those. Another suggestion is to use a push mower instead of a gasoline powered mower. I know that this is a little bit of an older practice, and many of us already have gas powered mowers. But if you do have that option, that's one way you can be a little more sustainable in your gardening, or just be a little bit more careful and mow less often, like I said. And then composting is actually a really great sustainable practice to use as well. If you have a compost bin, that would be a really great way to incorporate into your practices. Oops. All right, so then we wanted to just kind of show you an overall image of what this could look like, what we're talking about. So this image is from a garden in North Carolina. I chose it because it has a number of the elements within it that we wanted to share with you. It doesn't really have native plants. I believe these are daylilies, and so they're not native to the US, but we wanted to show this mainly for the components of what's in the image. And so you've got a bird bath, which is your water feature. You've got a bird house, which is dual cover and providing a place for wildlife to raise their young. And then you have plants, which provide food, cover for some species. And it's likely that this property is not being mowed as it has so many plants. And so you've got your sustainable practices as well. So if you have all of these elements, then you're set and you're ready to get certified. And again, like Sarah said, it does not have to be a large amount of space that you're utilizing. If you have an apartment, you can certainly do a certified wildlife habitat on your balcony. You can provide a bird bath and a bird feeder, bird house, and a number of native plants in a container garden, and that absolutely still counts. So hopefully the next slide will come up for you guys. So when you're going to get your yard certified, this is something we could kind of be working on at the moment, right? I believe most of them right now have their applications online. A few of them might still be mail-in, but if you're going through the National Wildlife Federation, which we highly recommend, it's very easy. It has a walkthrough process online. They are mostly, it looks like they've removed the mail-in option as far as I could tell. But essentially, you'll go online, you will fill out their checklist. And if you saw in some of the slides, there was like a minimum requirement at the bottom of the slide that was indicating how many food elements you had, how many water elements, how many cover elements. You'll just want to check those boxes for what you have, and they'll give you a big list of suggestions. Then once you get all of that filled out, and you hit submit, your garden will be added to a national registry, and you'll receive a very special unique number for your garden on that registry that no one else will have. And you'll also be sent a certificate. You can purchase for a small fee a certified wildlife habitat sign. They are very, great to have in your yard, especially for the neighbors. Nowadays, since we're all sheltering in place and we're viewing wildlife from home and we're viewing our yards from home, if you're taking a walk in your neighborhood, that's a really cool thing to see your neighbor's yard. And, it's an opportunity to educate our neighbors. And then the last piece here, when we send out the slides, you'll be able to click, is a video explaining the process. So just wanted to mention there's also a few other certification programs out there. It's not just the National Wildlife Federation. You can certify your yard through Monarch Watch. That's actually a program that promotes the planting of species that are native species that are beneficial to our butterflies, specifically our monarchs. So you're creating milkweed gardens, for lack of a better word, because milkweed is the host plant for the larval monarch, the caterpillar. and they desperately need those plants, and we can be planting them right now. It's a really great plant, grows really well in this environment. Uh, Also, pollinator gardens through Penn State is another way you can certify your garden. Bird-friendly habitat through Audubon, and certified butterfly gardens through the National American Butterfly Association. So those are all different options, and all of those links are in the slides. So once we send this out, you'll be able to click on those and check out what their certification processes are. They're generally very similar. They have all the 5 elements, but they may require a little bit more or a little bit less. So I hope everyone can see this slide. Our fun project that we wanted to work on with you today is kind of a takeaway so that you can get yourself started on getting your garden up and ready, and getting one of those elements into your garden. Now, we understand that these are images of things that are recyclable. So our goal here was to take something and upcycle it that was originally going to be trash or recycling and turn it into something really beneficial for wildlife. So today I'm going to just show you a couple of things and how you can turn one of these plastic bottles or a milk carton into a feeder. So the materials that you'll need include a clean plastic bottle or milk carton. If you're really crafty, you could use a tin can, maybe a coffee can would be a good thing to use, but you may need more intense tools to utilize that. You could probably also use glass, like a mason jar or something like that, but again, it's going to be a little bit more construction involved. So we wanted to keep it simple. You're going to need your bottle, and it's going to need to clean and dry with the cap. You definitely want the cap on as well. Then you're going to want to have some sticks. So I've got some pencils, but you could use chopsticks, or you could use a wooden spoon. You could also use found sticks outside if you don't want to use an item from your house. Then you're going to want to have a set of scissors as well. I don't have any bird seed, unfortunately. I didn't get out to the store, but you're going to want to have some bird seed. You're going to then want to have some string or twine. I used this stuff here. I think that it works really well because it holds up really strong. You're not going to want something like yarn that's going to get frayed or break. You could also use something metal if you have like a gardening, spool of metal twine. And then a push pin. This is actually kind of helpful in getting the hole started to put your perches in. So I've got a few images here of how we kind of started this process. So with your bottle, you're going to want to mark a location where you want to put your perches. And then using the push pin, you can start a hole and make it larger with your scissors. If you have trouble inserting the scissors, you can also use a candle or a lighter to heat the scissors so that it sort of melts the plastic a little bit. You want to be really careful about that. Obviously, kids should not be doing that part or this part in general, but it is helpful to get it started. Another technique, if you take the push pin and you make several holes in a row, you can sort of get the scissors in to cut the hole. And then you'll want to insert your first perch. And then your next step is to crisscross perpendicular the second perch. Or you can just go with the first perch. It's up to you. It's your design. It's your feeder. I liked the 2 perch method just because it gives more opportunities for more birds to access our feeder. So there I have an image there of the second perch. And then the last step before you attach your string, you're going to want to add feeding holes. So I have an example right here. You probably won't be able to see it super well, only because it's clear. But there are some holes just above the perch, and that's obviously for where the bird's going to feed. And you don't want them super large so that, a squirrel's getting in there, but just large enough so they can, poke in and get the seed, and then also not large enough so that the seed will all fall out. You can make it larger if you don't want to fill it all the way. So like I've designed mine so that I would fill the seed all the way. But if you did want to make your holes larger, you would only be able to fill it up to the line of where your holes are. So then the last step you're going to want to do is you're going to want to add 2 holes at the top and attach a string. And so then there you have it, your finished product, your finished bird feeder. So now it's just time to put birdseed in it and find the perfect place to hang it. Now is a really great time. We have a lot of our, birds are out singing in the trees as we take our time in our backyards to appreciate nature. So, this would be a really great way to invite nature into your property and to start to build towards your requirements for a certified wildlife habitat. And if you do happen to make a feeder, please share it with us. We'd love to see what you've made and to celebrate it and share it out. And you can decorate it if you wish, but just be careful what you decorate it with, because likely, wildlife might nibble on it a little bit. So if it's like paint or something, make sure it's dry before you put it out. And so, to wrap up our presentation, we really just kind of wanted to give you, again, a reminder of some of the great resources that are out there. These include DCNR, which has a listing of landscaping with native plants. It's a really great resource that includes all of the plants that you saw in the beginning few slides for what soil types and how much sunlight. And so that's a really great resource to go to. Also, the National Audubon Society has this amazing native plant database where when you go to the website and the link there, you just enter your zip code and it'll tell you what plants are great for your area. So I know that some folks on the call may not be from the locations we're from the Lehigh Valley. Sarah's from northeastern PA. We may have some folks from Philly on here. So just to make sure that you're getting the right plants for your area, they have a really great resource that'll curtail it specifically to your region and to your zip code. The National Wildlife Federation, of course, is kind of our go-to for certifying your habitat. But also Delaware Nature Society has some amazing resources and lists of plants that you can utilize. They even have a list for like hard difficult situations. So if you have sandy soil or you have clay soil, maybe you don't have a lot of sunlight. So they've got plants for all different situations and lists. So that's a really great resource. And then a few others include the Pennsylvania Native Plant Society, which has a chapter here in the Lehigh Valley and throughout Pennsylvania. And then the Xerces Society, which has a really great list of pollinator conservation resources. So just wanted to see if anybody has any questions. And you're welcome to unmute yourself at this point and ask a question or put your message in the chat and Sarah will read your questions out. So if anybody has any questions, just let us know.